Welcome to Internally Guided Life, a podcast to help you unlock a life of balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I am so excited about today's episode. We are going to be digging into something that I think is really powerful. Subtle shifts that make a big difference so we can create what we're going to call in this episode a magnetic reality. So, really big, powerful, attracting force in our life through small tweaks that are very sustainable, very actionable. And to help us explore this topic, we have an amazing guest joining us. Her name is Dr. Alice Rizzi. Alice is a licensed psychologist. She's a mindfulness mindset coach, and she created a program that is actually the inspiration for this episode called Magnetic Reality. And when I heard about this program, I knew that we needed to dig into this topic a little bit more. So her program is all about those subtle shifts that make those big impacts in our lives over time. So we're going to dig into all of that today. I'm so excited to see where this conversation takes us. With that, welcome, Alice. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait to hear more from you. After our first conversation, I was already just totally nerding out and super inspired. So we're going to keep it going today. But before we dig into all the good stuff, I would love for you to share a little bit of your story with our audience. So, who is Dr. Alice Rizzi? What brought you here?
Oh boy, I feel like
I
we can
know.
probably create a whole episode just from that question. Because actually, one of the things that I always say is that, like, we're a different person every day, and like you might find that in your own life. Some days you wake up and you're in a happy mood and you're like this happy, bubbly, optimistic, hopeful person. And then other days you wake up and for no reason you're cranky, you're pissed off, you're frustrated, you're annoyed, every little thing bothers you. And so it's really hard to answer that question, who are you, right?
Who are
When
you
you think
right
about it
now?
that way. Yeah. So right now I'm somebody who's super excited and passionate about being here and getting my message across. Maybe one way to think about it is I'm somebody who really values mindfulness, impact, and service. And those are like the core values of my business, Together Mindful. And so part of the reason that I show up on these types of podcasts is because I want to spread awareness about what a superpower mindfulness is. And mindfulness is one of those things that can help us make the small tweaks and shifts in our lives that end up making like a huge impact personally, professionally, and like in every relationship that we're in. So you can say I'm somebody who spreads awareness about mindfulness and helps other people create big shifts in their lives.
Yeah, yeah, mindfulness is definitely a superpower with a huge impact. Like it's something that we have this presence and power and control over that ripples out beyond our wildest dreams with the impact. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what brought you to this work. So what was your journey that led you here to your practice as a psychologist and a coach and your business?
Yeah. So I have always been a really curious, really sensitive individual. So when I was younger, I was always the person asking like a million questions, like who, what, why, where, when, how come? It did not make me the most popular child in school because I would ask questions like, why didn't we get the homework today? Are we gonna get it later? And I would get all of those like eyes on me, like, shut up, Alice. And that actually like progressed, like even as late as like my doctoral program, where we're all people in like our 20s and 30s and sometimes 40s. And I am the person asking all of the questions about like all the theories and what are we going to do and why do things work like that and why aren't they blah blah blah. And yeah, you'd be surprised how like mean and impatient even adults can be, and not just children.
100%.
Um, But that did not make me the most popular person in the class. And so for a really long time, I actually had pretty much like a hate-hate relationship with curiosity.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I started digging into mindfulness and like work around enoughness, work around like self-worth, that I realized that actually my curiosity and my sensitivity are actually my personal superpowers. They're what enables me to connect with individuals in a really powerful, meaningful, deep way. And like just as an example, my husband always asks me like, how do I get people to open up to me so much? Because whenever we go to like a party or a gathering, like complete strangers end up spilling their entire life story to me in a matter of minutes. Like this happened literally just a couple of days ago. Like I ran into a new neighbor and within 5 minutes, I knew like half her life story. And it's because like I'm just a naturally curious individual, and when people speak, I listen. And that's something that came naturally to me. It was something that I think I was probably to an extent also conditioned to do in my life and, in my family. And I ended up just being that person that people tell everything to. And so that really lent itself nicely to majoring in psychology and pursuing being a therapist. It's a profession where I was like, I just get to talk to people and I get to listen and I get to hear their stories and I get to empathize and ask questions. And so that's why I pursued psychology. And it was kind of like from day one in undergrad, I knew I was going to become a psychologist. I didn't know it was going to take like 10 years before I could finally do what I wanted to do, but here we are. Um, and then along the way, I started learning about mindfulness, and I really started being very interested in like what mindfulness is, what the difference is with meditation, how it can benefit me, how it can benefit other people. And I ended up choosing my doctoral program because they had a mindfulness research team, and that was really exciting to me. So I spent 5 years on that. I wrote my dissertation on mindfulness and what it means like to be in a mindful state versus to be more mindful as an individual. And so after I graduated, I continued to implement this mindfulness work with clients. And like every time I would ask a client at the end of like our work together, what is your biggest takeaway? And I would have clients who come to see me for like anxiety and performance issues and relationships and family dynamics and trauma and depression and ADHD and all sorts of things. And at the end, they would say it was the mindfulness, like hands down, the mindfulness was the most helpful thing to me because that rippled into every area of their life. And so it was over the like the beginning of the pandemic that I started taking a lot of different courses. And then eventually it led me to courses on courses because I was like, well, if other people can do it, why can't I? And one of the things that like those courses always ask you is what's a topic that like you're really passionate about, that you have a lot of knowledge in, that you would want to share with other people. And for me, it was mindfulness. So that's how I became a mindfulness course creator. And now I'm somebody who runs two businesses and is really passionate about this work.
Yes, I love it. Your passion is like contagious. Like I feel so excited about mindfulness right now, and I'm already a mindfulness advocate, but I think just seeing your enthusiasm, like I can feel it across the space and time of the
Oh, I
distance.
love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's so funny because people tell me that like I think sometimes people think of mindfulness as like very dry and very like clear, well, not even clear cut, but like they have this idea about what it is. Most people think it's the same as meditation, which it's not. Um, but either like they have this concrete focused idea of what it is and they're not really interested in learning about it more, or it's like this magical ethereal woo-woo concept that either like they're really attracted to or they're like, no, that's not for me. And so like for me, it's I come in and I clear up some of the myths and misconceptions and I talk about how it is a superpower. And I think hearing how excited I am about it gets other people excited and they realize that it is tangible, that all it is like those micro shifts, like we were starting to talk about before, that it's not this magical woo-woo concept, that it is rooted in science, it is evidence-based. There's tons of research on it, and that there's ways that you can implement it beginning right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I know most people who are fans of mindfulness, like they have this personal impact story of how it changed everything. I'm one of those people. When I encountered mindfulness and yoga and meditation, and I was kind of like exploring the whole gambit of it at once, studying it
Mhm.
in school and my psychology program, and then also like really digging deep into a personal healing practice because that's something I really needed at that time. So, I've felt those personal shifts, and I'm sure you have as well. So before we dig into like these shifts, and I really do want to
Mhm.
maybe do some of the like myth busting because that sounds fun,
Mhm.
but I would love to hear what the personal impact has been for you. What's fueling your personal passion for this?
There's so much. Honestly, like there's just so much because I first learned about mindfulness, I want to say when I was around 20 years old. So it's already been like a little bit over 15 years at this point. And I think in the beginning, it was probably like I'm looking at it in hindsight because it's really hard for me now to put myself in where I was before I found it.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, I was a very, very anxious individual. Like I had, I think, forms of like generalized anxiety and social anxiety and speaking anxiety and relationship anxiety and like all of the fears. And I had a lot of self-doubt. And when I first started learning about mindfulness, it was kind of like this promise of inner peace. And I was like so intrigued by that. And I was like, yeah, sure, give me some of that. So I started learning about it. I started meditating, but it didn't quite like set in. And it wasn't until grad school where I started incorporating some of those small micro shifts into my day-to-day life, where I started seeing, like, wow, this is really powerful. Like, not only am I more present in my life, but I'm happier, I'm more grateful, I have more joy. And I do feel the sense of like inner peace. Like, I accept myself more. I do think that I'm worthy. I do think that I am enough. I see the impact that it has on other people and how I relate to them. It helps me see meaning and depth in life. It helps me make choices that I'm proud of, that make me happy, that I know I won't regret in the future. And it even like colors how I look at the past, how I look at things that I've been through, things other people have been through. It allows me to be much more like kind and compassionate and understanding towards other people. And that's why I believe that it's such a superpower because I've seen it impact my own life in this transformational way. I've seen it impact my clients' lives, and I can already see, like, I have this vision of how it can impact the world should more people start incorporating it into their lives.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine, oh my gosh, I could just dream on this forever, but imagine if everybody took like a sliver, if every single person and pulled that into their life, into their work, into their relationships, like the world would be such a kinder, more transformational place. Oh, it's
A
so needed.
100%. Like I have this dream where it's like I hesitate to use this language sometimes because people might be like, "Oh, but that's a pipe dream. Oh, that's never going to happen." But I literally think that if more people were mindful, we could have world peace.
100%.
Like we
Yes.
literally can like if we all like listen to each other and practice empathy and curiosity and non-judgment and we try to be a little bit kinder, like there would not be as much violence and aggression in the world because we would try to take each other's perspective more and we would try to respond in a nicer way that takes other people's emotions into consideration, even if
Yeah.
we disagree, right? Because we don't have to agree on everything, but there's a kind, compassionate, non-judgmental way of disagreeing. And then there's an aggressive, violent way of disagreeing. And I think mindfulness can teach us to be kinder to each other.
100%. It's such a powerful healing tool, right? That once we've started to cultivate that joy and that inner peace, I think it's so much easier then to not be reactive,
A
yeah,
hundred
when we're
percent.
with people.
And I always remember like the quote from Legally Blonde where like Elle Woods is doing like her spiel in court and she is like, happy people just don't kill people.
Yes.
And so to me, it's like if mindfulness can help us be more joyous and grateful and happy, then we're less likely to do harm to other people because happy people don't go around killing.
Right. Yes. People who are in a lot of pain do the violent things, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I think so, like going back to the personal transformation and the transformation for clients, like I think mindfulness helps us become more self-aware, including like aware of like our own wounds and traumas and things that have impacted us. But because mindfulness also incorporates and that aspect of kindness, compassion, non-judgment, understanding, we're able to see it in a different way and we're able to see ourselves not as wounded humans but as people who are like learning and evolving and expanding and developing. And we're also able to see even those people who hurt us in a little bit more of that kind and understanding way. Like it doesn't take away our pain, but we're able to see it like wounded people wound others. And so like you just start seeing how things fit together. And for me, like that was all thanks due to mindfulness. Like I did not have that awareness before. I was not able to have that sense of compassion for other people or for myself. Like I treat myself much nicer now because I'm a more mindful human and I want the best for myself, right? Like mindfulness helps us befriend ourselves rather than like criticize, punish, and hate on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so tied into our sense of cultivation of like self-love, self-care, self-worth. And we talk about these concepts a lot on this show that I do the burnout coaching primarily for my business. So it's something that's really important to me as someone who's experienced, burnout and has also went through all of the anxiety and all the things of my early 20s and adolescence before that. But it's really this powerful tool for that individual healing that does spread so impactfully and so powerfully. And I think that's where it brings us to this topic where we're discussing this magnetic reality, like what it means to have this really big, full, fulfilling life that's still grounded in reality and there's still pain, but the
Hmm.
way we engage with it is so different because of these
Hmm.
subtle shifts. So obviously, mindfulness is a big part of making these shifts and getting to this reality. You mentioned earlier that there's a lot of misconceptions around mindfulness. So I
Hmm.
would love to hear you speak for a moment on, what are some of the myths and what are the realities? What actually is the thing that we refer to as mindfulness?
Awesome. Yeah, I think it helps us to have the same language and like be on the same page. So I always love giving my definition of mindfulness because there's not like a one concrete definition. And the research shows that people always define it slightly differently, which makes sense because it's like a thousands years old concept. Of course, it's going to evolve over time. But my definition of mindfulness is that it is the quality of being present in the moment with awareness, acceptance, kindness, compassion, curiosity, and non-judgment. So you already heard me talk about
Mm.
many of these factors because to me, they all make up what it means to be mindful. Now, for any listeners, I don't want you to get overwhelmed. You don't have to remember those qualities. You don't have to memorize my definition. It's not like the end all be all. It's just that when I practice mindfulness, I notice myself being more aware, more accepting, more curious, and so on. When I was studying for my dissertation and I was doing research, those are the qualities that kept popping up. It's people were able to be more curious, less judgmental, more compassionate. And when I see clients continuously practicing mindfulness on a regular basis, I see their transformation into becoming more aware, kind, compassionate human beings, and so on. So it's sort of like when you start seeing the same patterns and trends over and over and over, that's what shapes my perception of what this seemingly big ethereal concept is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that's a beautiful definition. I love the way that you pull in all of these components. And I think that it's important to understand that it's this lived experience in a moment that's
Hmm.
authentic and grounded in the reality of the moment.
Hmm.
It's not a idealized state on a mountaintop.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's maybe one of the myths that people have, that in order to practice mindfulness or be mindful, you have to be on a mountaintop or like on a desert island or on the beach or in the forest or in a cabin somewhere away from the universe. And it's like, no, I live in New York City. It's very loud here. Like, I'm not going to be able to get away from people and be zen. Like, there's not even like a real park nearby, you know? So it's almost like just being present, however your present is. Not some ideal present that you think you should have, but literally living in your current present in each moment. And that kind of goes back to that question we were talking about earlier, like, who are you? Well, in this moment, this is who I am. If we had this conversation a week from now, I might have shown up as a different person. The conversation we might have had might have been different. You would have asked different questions. And so it's sort of like bringing that type of like curiosity to each moment and allowing like the present here to guide you.
I I love this so much because it's making me feel like awe, inspired, wonder. Like when each moment is opening up in this way, this like new and curious and unlimited potential kind of way where it's who you were 2 minutes ago doesn't even matter. Who you are now. What are you experiencing now? That does naturally open us to like curiosity. And I think even, for me, excitement. I'm like, oh yeah, who am I right now? This is a fun ride. Okay.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think it's also why so many people end up getting like overwhelmed and burnt out because they don't let the present moment shape who they are. They hold on to this
Mm.
like image or expectation of who they think they should be, or who at some point somebody told them they needed to be, or who they're not. And like sometimes when you're so attached to a certain image, expectation, assumption, whatever, it's like you don't let yourself evolve with the present moment. And so that's non-acceptance of reality. That's rejecting reality, which is going to make you not present, not aware, probably more bitter, not open to just seeing things how they actually are.
Yeah, it makes you so much more tired, and it's a struggle to fight with what
Yes.
is. It's much more exhausting.
Well, and it's like you see that, right? Like when you open yourself up to new ideas and to being in this moment and to being present, you end up experiencing excitement and awe and joy and gratitude and like this feeling of like, what's next, right? You feel inspired and motivated to live and to be, right? And when you're not, where it's like when you have this rigidity around how things should be and how they're not how they're supposed to be, it's like you're limiting yourself. Like this is where self-sabotage happens. You
Mm.
don't let yourself move forward because you're unwilling to engage with present reality as it is, which will stop you from creating the kind of magnetic reality that you want to have. So you have to recognize what this moment is actually like in order to get yourself unstuck so that you can actually move forward to where you want to go.
Yeah, it's this liberating force so that all of the things that happened before, like you can break those chains and move into what is now, like what is actually happening, what is serving, what is life-giving in this moment. I
Yeah.
yeah, I just love
Yeah.
the way you talk about it.
Thank you.
Like I could listen to
So,
you all day.
oh, amazing. It's easier when I get asked like the questions, right? Because that's what fires me up. I get asked questions and then I know what to talk about and I know what interests people. And so I'm happy to give more information on that. But to get back to that like original question you had about like what are some of the misconceptions, right? A lot of people think that mindfulness is the same as meditation, and that's not the case because there's different forms of meditation. There's mindfulness meditation, there's Zen meditation, there's transcendental meditation, there's mantra meditation, there's loving kindness meditation. And like they're not like good or bad, right or wrong. There's just different forms of meditating. There's religious forms of meditating that are like founded in whatever their religion is. But then there's absolutely secular ways of meditating. And mindfulness meditation is like that. Growing up, I was never a religious person. And so I think I probably initially also had some of those misconceptions like, oh, is mindfulness the same as Buddhism? Do I have to become a Buddhist person now if I want to meditate? I quickly realized that no, that was not the case. Mindfulness specifically is a secular practice, the way, like the research teaches it now. And so that's my experience with mindfulness. I'm not as experienced with other forms of meditation. That doesn't mean they're bad or ineffective. I'm just not as familiar with them. So I teach on what I know, and what I know is mindfulness.
Yeah.
So the day-to-day mindfulness, and then there's mindfulness meditation, and I teach people both. Day-to-day or informal mindfulness is those moments where you are mindful and present in this moment. So that could be, like if you're watching a sunset or a sunrise and you're noticing like feeling of awe and gratitude and inspiration, that's a mindful moment for you. Or like if you're sitting there petting your cat and you're noticing the fur and the purring and like the smell and like you're playful and you're just being with your cat, like that's a mindful moment. And I teach people to integrate more of those kind of mindful moments into their day intentionally. So, for example, like if you're doing the dishes, practicing doing the dishes mindfully, opening up to your five senses. So, noticing like what does the dish soap smell like? What does the sponge feel like? What temperature is the water? And you don't have to do it for like 20 minutes. Like, even start with like 30 seconds, start with a minute of mindfulness, turning your attention to the present moment with whatever task you're doing. You could be folding laundry, you could be feeding your child, you could be eating, you could be walking. And it's if you tune into your five senses, that will ground you in the present moment. So that's one of those micro shifts that you can make even starting right now is asking yourself, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I touch? Because you only experience your senses in the present moment. You can't smell something 5 years ago. You might remember what something smelled like 5 years ago, but memory is different from actually the experience of being present right here.
Yeah. I like the way that you differentiate the lived mindfulness practices of being present in the moment as you engage with your day-to-day life versus that designated time. And I think
Mhm.
for some people, they really love that designated time and it helps them to be more present in those daily moments. Like they want that meditation practice and it facilitates that. And I also know
Exactly.
people who hate meditating
Yep.
and they
And
can't
that's
do it
totally
correctly.
okay.
Yes.
That's totally okay. Like I tell people like I want to help you integrate mindfulness to the extent that it's helpful to you in your life. If you don't want to meditate, like you do not have to. I might encourage someone to challenge themselves and to practice a couple of times and try maybe a couple of different meditative practices to see if any of them resonate. But at the end of the day, like nobody's forcing you, right? You don't have to meditate. It's just that when you practice mindfulness meditation, it helps you be more mindful in your day-to-day life. So if one of your goals is to be more mindful, to be more present, to have more gratitude, to be more compassionate, to be kind, to be not less judgmental, then mindfulness meditation is like the how to get to that place. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, but then you can't be as surprised why you're not making progress towards that goal, right? And again, like that's not meant to be critical or punitive. It's kind of like just a statement of fact. There are other practices you can engage in that can help you be a kinder, more understanding human being, right? Like you can journal, you can be in therapy or coaching, like you can do a lot of work on yourself that is outside of mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness meditation is just a tool to help you along the way, in addition to.
Yeah, well, and I think of it like the way that you were just framing it up, you're strengthening that mindfulness muscle when
Hmm.
you're sitting in intentional practice. You're rewiring the brain because
Yes,
we're very distracted human beings. And I
we
think,
can be.
yeah,
Yeah,
people tend to
exactly.
struggle at first with like the being in the moment thing. All of these
Yeah.
stories kind of pull them back. And so having that time to practice helps you to get to the place where
Yeah.
you can be more engaged in the present.
Absolutely. And so maybe this is helpful for anybody who is not as familiar with mindfulness meditation, is a lot of people have this misconception that this is what mindfulness meditation looks like, that it's just this muscle of focusing and not being distracted and like this is all you're doing. And so when they can't do that, they're like, I'm doing it wrong. I'm bad at it. It sucks. I don't like it. What they don't realize is that what the actual practice looks like is this. You're attending to something. You notice distraction and then you bring it back. And then you notice something pops up into your mind, you acknowledge it, and you bring it back. And then you notice a car honking outside, and then you bring it back. So, what mindfulness meditation actually is that intention about noticing the distraction and intentionally choosing to come back to the present moment. And you never have to anything. You simply give yourself the choice. So that's one of the other things I love about mindfulness is it simply shows you what options are available to you. When I get distracted, I can choose to stay there if I'm mindful, or I can choose to bring myself back. When you are practicing this over and over and over in meditation, it helps you be able to see those type of options in your day-to-day life. So like if you're answering emails and a coworker wants to talk to you, you can say, you know what? Not right now. I'm paying attention to my emails now. I'll come find you later. Or like if you notice a notification on your phone, you're able to attend to the notification or put your phone back away. But suddenly you have this choice. You're not just moving on autopilot.
Yes, it's empowering in that way. Like it gives you the ability and the personal power to not just be carried away by
Yeah.
your thoughts and your surroundings and the events and the stories. Like you get to choose where that focus is redirected and that
Yeah.
distraction isn't a problem, it's a naturally occurring event.
Yes. Yeah, and that there's no way of practicing mindfulness meditation that is wrong because if you notice that you got distracted, then you're mindful of the fact that you got distracted. If you notice that you're feeling more relaxed today, then you're mindful of the relaxed state, right? If you're not relaxed, if you're annoyed and frustrated and your body is tense, then you're simply mindful of those things.
Yes, I remember one of the first like mindfulness meditation practices I did in like a classroom, like a guided classroom type of setting, because that was where I was learning a lot of this. And this conversation is making me think of like the comical experience I had internally when I realized what it was and like you notice the thought, you bring it back, you notice the thought, you bring it back, and then I'm having this like internal dialogue of oh yeah, thinking about if my tire is low pressure or whatever it might be. Oh yeah, I'm in this room and this is where my feet are and this is where my breath is. And
Hmm.
it's kind of comical. Like even still I'll chuckle at myself sometimes when you notice where your mind wanders because
Hmm.
we're just such interesting creatures.
Yeah. And like, you've probably seen or heard this research as well. Like we have like thousands of thoughts every day, right? And like the number fluctuates depending like 75,000 or 95,000 or whatever. Thousands of thoughts every day. And like most of them are the same exact thoughts. So like today, you probably had thousands of the same thoughts that you had yesterday and the day before that and the day before that and the day before that. And like you just don't realize that your mind gets sucked into these stories without your attention or awareness. So all mindfulness does is it brings your attention and awareness to those stories, and then you have a choice. How do I want to respond to it? Does it even warrant a response? Like if I notice the thought the sky is blue, I don't need to do anything about that,
Yeah,
right?
just
But
let
if
it
I
go.
notice, yeah, but if I notice the thought, oh, it's raining, I can respond by taking an umbrella with me. And that's kind of all it is, right? Like you're just giving yourself more options when you are actually mindful in this present moment. You notice, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's my body doing? And once you know that, you get to decide, how do I want to respond to this? If I need to respond at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And when are we choosing to just keep on going? Because like you said, they don't all need to be entertained and they don't all need to sweep us away.
And
So
that's what some of those micro shifts, right? Like that is literally a micro shift, is noticing, what am I thinking? And, I was doing actually a podcast episode, I think it was last month, and a person asked me like this question that I couldn't really answer. She was like, Alice, when did you start noticing? And like the question even took me aback because like I use this language all the time now, like notice your thoughts, notice your
uh-huh.
emotions. I notice this. And I realized like that is not true of everyone. Not everybody like notices things. Not everybody uses the language of noticing. And I could not tell you when I started doing it, but it was probably a result of being more mindful because mindfulness helps you notice.
Yeah, it cultivates that sense of observation, right?
That's that
Yeah.
awareness, right? Like self-awareness, other awareness, environmental awareness.
Yeah. So you read my mind because I was going to just circle back to this idea of subtle shifts that are really powerful. And obviously mindfulness as a practice, like this is a powerful thing that once cultivated totally transforms lives. For people who are new in the practice or struggle with the practice, what are some of the little shifts that you might point to help them start to kind of get used to the noticing?
hmm I would say like start with the five senses, honestly. Like especially if your goal is to just be more present in your day-to-day life. That's it. Be a little bit more mindful. Is bring your attention to your senses and ask yourself that question of like, what can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch? And you can start by doing it like just once a day. It doesn't have to take more than like a few moments, right? One of my favorite practices, and I do this almost every day, if not every day, is I go to the window and I just look outside, literally like in my backyard, and I notice the tree and I notice the squirrel, I notice the sun or the rain or the clouds or the neighbor. And I just give myself like a couple of deep breaths as I look outside and just notice. And it doesn't have to be any more than that when you're just starting out.
I love that. Just a couple of moments to breathe and notice your surroundings and to tap into those senses intentionally, right? Like we have
hmm
access to these all the time. They're always there, and yet we're so on autopilot, so swept away and frazzled by all the busyness and all the things that need to be done that sometimes we just don't even realize what it feels like to be in our body.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And you're allowing yourself to like notice even more nuanced things, right? So like right now, you might not notice something unless there's like a drastic change, right? So like a window blows open and suddenly you're freezing because of that gust of air. But otherwise, you might not realize, oh, actually my feet were kind of cold, or like my arms are getting kind of chilly. Maybe I should grab a jacket. Like because especially like if it's a really slow transition, right? And so one of the things that mindfulness helps you cultivate is that like more nuanced awareness. And the same is true about your thoughts and your emotions, so that you don't suddenly find yourself pissed off at like a 10, on a 1 to 10 scale. You notice like, oh, I'm a little agitated, or I'm a little annoyed. Oh, I'm starting to get a little bit more frustrated. And if you can catch yourself early on, you can actually cope with it in a much healthier way, right? Than if you find yourself at like a 9 or a 10, and then suddenly it's, I have to drink, I have to smoke, I have to yell at somebody, I have to disconnect, I have to withdraw, right? Like that's when we are at that like 9 or 10 level, is when we tend to have those extreme impulsive or compulsive reactions that many times we end up regretting. So to me, like mindfulness is like how to regret proof your life. If you are more present and aware, then you can actually do something earlier on so you don't have those type of outbursts.
I love that. I feel like that could be a book or something, How to Regret Proof Your Life. I think a lot of people would read that.
I mean, I like that title. I was gonna say, like, I'm in the process of writing a book. It's not probably not gonna be called that, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, maybe another book later on. That's exciting though. I think everyone that's listening will have to keep an eye out for that, make sure that they follow you. Okay, so there's so many things I want to explore with you, but I do want to make sure we spend a couple of moments on how you can pull these mindfulness practices, the subtle shifts that happen with mindfulness, into living a value-based life and how
Mm.
that contributes to this magnetic reality as well.
Yeah. So, okay. If we're talking about like what even is a magnetic reality, I think that's going to depend on each individual and their values. Because what might be a magnetic reality to me might not be a magnetic reality to you. So to me, like the whole concept, right, is like living this life that you love, that is fulfilling, that is meaningful. And so naturally, like what's meaningful to me might not be meaningful to you. And that will be dictated by our values. And so you can start off by even asking yourself, like, well, what is a magnetic reality to me? What types of things can I have in my life, or do I want to work towards that will make it feel attractive and joyful and meaningful? And that might help you realize what some of your core values even are, right? So, like, is it family? Is it education? Is it career? Is it impact? Is it service? Is it kindness? Is it a million other things? Um, and some of the work that I help clients do is nail down what their core values are. I even have one of my like mini courses is a core values assessment that anybody can take at their own pace that will help you nail down your own core values and then create short and long-term goals based on that so that you'll always feel like you're living in alignment. Like living in alignment, like being in your own authority, like being authentic to yourself. That to me is a part of having and living your own magnetic reality, but it might not be to you. So again, it's like getting clear on what does that even mean to me? What kind of life do I want to live? And then we can start working on the specific micro shifts that you would need to make to achieve that or to live in line with that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense that it's so individualized because it's going to depend on the value set of that person in front of you, that person that's trying to shift in the ways that they need to are going to depend on what matters to them and what lights them up. How do
Mhm.
you help people? I know you just said you have a whole course on this, so in a couple minutes we're not going to be able to get to it, but when I work with people on values, sometimes I notice there's stickiness where it's like you identify the 20 or the 30 that you love, and there's so many different processes for narrowing it down, getting to like a more tangible number, like a 3 to 5. But
Mhm.
some people really struggle with that. So,
Mhm.
what are some of the practices or processes that you use with clients to help them start to get a little bit more of a tangible grasp on those core things that everything else can kind of move through?
I mean, you might laugh, but I don't give them an out until they've narrowed it down. Like, there's no option to leave it at 20 or even 10. I don't give people a specific number, but I tell them like a handful and whatever number you think you can actually remember, right?
Mm,
So for some people, it might like they can only remember three things. For some people, it might be seven. Some people, it might be nine. I personally would still think nine is too many because one of the things that I teach people, and we can get a little bit into this, not too much, but there's a difference between values and goals. Right? So goals are achievable, they're feasible. It's like something on your to-do list, you finish it, you cross it off, or you check it off, and you're done and you move on to the next thing. Values are more the direction that you're going in. Like values are like northeast, southwest, right? You never get to north. You can only ever keep walking or driving or
mm,
flying towards north. So we find what those things are to you. So like, again, as an example, if one of your core values is family, you never get to family. Like you might work towards having your own family or improving family relationships within your like your family of origin, but you don't get to a place where I'm done with family if that's a core value of yours,
right.
right? So that's it, it is important, I think, to differentiate like what are my goals and are they in line with my values. Understanding that you never like fully meet your values, that like you're never done working on them. You're only ever on that journey towards them. So what I tell people is you want to have the number of values that you can remember because each value is going to probably have at least one or two goals attached, and each goal is also probably going to have several actions attached to it, right? Like if one of your goals is to like go to Mexico, right? Like the actions might be like look up a map of Mexico and decide where in Mexico you want to go. The next one might be to find a few like driving routes from your home to there and pick which one. The next one might be like where do you want to stop along the way? Like that's already several actions that are based on just this one goal. And you might have other goals related to this value of travel. So like once people realize, oh, that's a lot of things to keep track of for just one value, it sort of like sinks in. Okay, I really do want to narrow down my list because otherwise I'm going to overwhelm myself. And when we get overwhelmed, we kind of, most of us go into like analysis paralysis and where we just don't make any decisions and then we do nothing. And that keeps us stuck. And then it's like, well, why am I stuck in my life? Well, maybe you've overwhelmed yourself with all of these big actions.
Yes, that happens all the time. I feel like it's these unrealistic and not even just big goals, but so many directions. Like
Yeah.
we can do anything we want, but we can't do everything we want. Like we're only one
Yes.
person in one
Yes.
moment. You can only do so many things with your time. So these values, they give you a sense of what matters most. And
Yeah.
I loved your, I'm going to steal it. I'm going to use it. Your
Yeah.
way of speaking about values as like the directions because you never
Mhm.
fully get there, but it's the way you're going and it's the thing you're aligned with. Like that's just such a beautiful representation of that. I love that.
Yeah, and like the mindfulness is what helps us pay attention to one thing at a time, right? Like do one thing mindfully in this present moment, and then turn your attention to the next thing and the next thing. And I think like so many high achievers and perfectionists, they're all about multitasking, right? Like that's that whole like hustle culture. Like I must do more. I might work on all the projects and I won't let myself rest until I'm done. And the thing is, like, when are you ever going to be done? Like, does your to-do list actually have an endpoint? Because there's always going to be something that you want to do. As soon as you check off one goal, you're just going to move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's just the nature of life. And the thing is, like, you can't actually multitask, right? Like, you can try to do several things around the same time, but then truthfully, like, you're not going to do any of them well.
Hmm.
You're going to be inefficient. And I think sometimes people say, like, oh, I'm really good at multitasking. I mean, they might be more efficient than I might be. I suck at multitasking. I am not efficient at all when I try to split my attention. But chances are they likely still make more mistakes and their attention wanders and they don't get to everything when they're splitting their attention in that way. Because our brains aren't wired to be able to do multiple things at once.
Right, we're really like task switching, which is tiring. Like it's
Mhm.
using up our mental resources at a great rate.
Yeah. Exactly, which is why like part of the thing that mindfulness trains is that like idea of like, well, do I actually want to switch to a different task or to let that distraction actually pull me away, or do I want to stay on task? If you are mindful, you're able to recognize, you know what, even stepping away from my desk for 30 seconds, that's already going to task switch, which is already going to drain my energy and it's already going to make it harder for me to get back into what I was doing. So on second thought, maybe I won't do that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like the way that the kind of the values-based living and the mindfulness, they are like two sides of the same coin. Like you need the mindfulness to engage in your moment, in your present reality with intention and choice and focus. And then
Mhm.
the values-based living gives your life that fulfillment, that purpose, that
Hmm.
direction that you're
Yes,
seeking for. Yeah.
exactly right. Because research says that we feel most fulfilled when we're taking actions that are in line with our values and we feel depressed, anxious, sad, frustrated, angry, stuck when we're taking actions that actually are not in line with our values. So, like, again, just as an example, if I say one of my core values is travel, but I haven't taken a vacation in 5 years, am I really living a values aligned life? No, not really.
Mhm.
Like looking at pictures of Italy isn't going to cut it. Right? Or
Yeah.
like if somebody says like I really value my family, family is really important to me, but they make no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, they only see each other once a year. Can you really say that you're authentically living in line with your values? Just because you say something doesn't make it true. So
Hmm.
like when you are mindful of those discrepancies, you are able to take actions to repair them and to actually course correct. Like, oh, hey, I notice I've been drifting away from what I say I want in my life. How can I course correct so that I am taking more values aligned actions? If I haven't traveled in 5 years, maybe I can finally take that vacation. Maybe I can finally explore that new city. Heck, maybe I can go a half hour away and look at that statue that I've been meaning to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so powerful, I think, thinking about these these are really subtle shifts, right? They are
Hmm.
tiny, incremental, in the moment changes that move us towards what we want. And I'm curious before we get close to the end here. I know we're like getting close on time. This has flown by. But is there anything else you would want to share about the subtle shifts that lead to these big changes and how you relate with these concepts and how you see it play out in people's lives? So just
Hmm.
kind of open that for a second.
Yeah. I mean, so again, we talked about so many things today. And so I just want to reassure people like, you don't have to implement it all at once. Like, even though there's so many micro shifts you could start making, you don't have to implement all of them all at once, right? Like, pick one or two things that you even heard on this episode that like excited you or you thought, oh, that sounds really cool. And just start there and do that for a little while, and then maybe later move on to something else. Yeah, if anybody's familiar with James Clear and Atomic Habits, right, he really talks a lot about how to make habits stick. And one of the best ways to do that is to like start with just one habit at a time and like pair them together. I talk about habit pairing with my clients a lot. So first you start one habit, then you pair it with another. Once those two things are already habitual, only then do you add a third one. And that's how you keep yourself from getting too overwhelmed and you're able to make those tweaks on your own. Do I still like this habit? Does it still make sense in my life? Maybe it's now
Mhm.
something that I want to stop doing, right? Like, so again, that mindful awareness allows you to pay attention to those things. What makes sense in my life and what doesn't? And the more you do this type of work, as in just ask yourself, like, how am I feeling in this moment? What thoughts am I noticing? What can I see around me? The more noticing you're going to start doing in your own life, the more aware you're going to become, the more you're going to start seeing discrepancies between what you say you want and what you actually have. And that will allow you to think about what tweaks you need to make to get from where you currently are to where you actually want to go. So, that program you mentioned, Magnetic Reality, that's in essence the entire premise of it is that we start little by little by little until you have a really strong foundation. And I try not to throw everything at you at once. It's literally just one practice, then another, then another. And I am there to help like guide and coach people along the way and to answer questions that they have and so that they don't get overwhelmed or start sabotaging themselves. And I can point to exactly what skill or what shift they need to go back to or where they need to start from. And you can pick just one or two things, and that will already have a huge impact in your personal life. You don't have to implement everything.
I feel like that's such a powerful thought to kind of get close to wrapping on because Yeah, we did talk about a lot. And if somebody is brand new to the journey, don't try to do it all. I feel like we see that all the time, especially we both work with similar populations, really high achieving people that have so many big goals and dreams, and that's amazing. And they've gotten to a certain point and probably had some level of success with going at it the way that they have, but maybe they're feeling tired or whatever else it might be. And the power of just choosing one shift at a time
Yeah.
and not trying to take it all at once. And then you're not feeling frustrated with yourself because you set 10,000 goals and you didn't meet every single one. Like, get really good at the one thing. Like, allow that
Yeah.
quality to start to infuse into your life.
And like I can already hear the resistance coming from some people, like, right? Like, but it's so exciting, but I want to do everything. But what if I run out of time? And so take yourself off the ledge, right? And like this one example that I think I originally saw on someone else's Instagram, but it really resonated with me was this idea that like if you take a plane route, right, like flying, say from New York to California, and you shift the route by just 1%, you're gonna end up in a totally different place, probably in a different continent, if not in water, right? And that's just a 1% difference. And the same is true with so many of these skills that we're talking about. If you implement just one new thing and nothing else, you're already going to see a huge transformation. And the other thing is like, there's no deadline. There's no time by which you need to master all of these skills. And you can like give yourself some slack. Like you don't have to master everything. Like let yourself be a beginner. In mindfulness, there's this concept called beginner's mind, right? It's where you approach like anything, whether you've done it once or 200 times, you approach it with a beginner's mind. And even though at that point I've already been doing mindfulness for 10 years, that was still a revelation for me. She was like, Alice, let yourself be a beginner. Because at that point, coaching was new to me. Right? So I had to really practice letting myself be a beginner. And so that's what I want to encourage all of your listeners to do is pick one skill and let yourself be a beginner at that.
Yes, I love it. Okay, before we say goodbye, do you want to share with everybody where they can find you, how they can stay connected with you? We'll put it all in the show notes, but I always like to hear from our guests directly how people can keep this conversation going and work with you if it seems like something
Yeah.
they want to explore.
Absolutely. So my primary website is togethermindful.com. Depending on when you listen to this, my website is like currently undergoing some changes. So it might look one way or another way if you see it in a few months. But yeah, Together Mindful, like that's my home base for my mindfulness coaching business. I offer self-paced courses, group programs, coaching opportunities. And so you can always find me there. I have tons of free resources. I have like at least three different free things. Like I have the Mindful Body Guide if you want to start with becoming more aware of your own body. I have free resources where you can listen to me doing interviews similar to this. What else? I have a mindfulness toolkit. So like if you're like, oh, mindfulness sounds really cool, where do I start? Start by downloading the free mindfulness toolkit, and I will walk you through exactly what steps to take. And I have 7 free practices that I guide you through to start incorporating it in your life. So all of that is on togethermindful.com. I am on Instagram at Dr. Alice Rizzi. I'm not super active at this time, but there's like 4 years worth of stuff there that you can flip through. That's all in line with things that we've been talking about today. And you can always email me, Alice at alicerizzi.com for anybody that wants to connect that way or has questions for me. I love talking about mindfulness. You could probably hear it. So hit me up with your questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much again for coming on and sharing with us. This has been such a fun conversation. The hour has flown by. I can't even believe that it's already been an hour. But I
And
will
I've had
have
so much fun. So
it's
hopefully it was also fun for your listeners.
I have no doubt. Yeah, there is no way this episode was anything but enjoyable to listen to. So, thank you for bringing your passion, your presence, your mindfulness to us, to the show, and to everybody that's listening. Take Alice's advice. Pick a thing and be a beginner and take care of yourselves while you're doing it. We'll talk to y'all next time.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources,
resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.